Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, it's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. And today we're continuing on with the Industrial Revolution. And today we're going to look more at the societal impacts, the effects of the Industrial Revolution had on the citizenry and the regular folk that lived in England and abroad. So let's get into the mix. Let me move my toolbar. All right. So today's title is the social impact of the Industrial Revolution, Chapter 5, Section 3. We're moving on, people. We just keep chugging along. Chug, 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 chug. All right. Chapter 5, Section 3. All right, that was your warm-up. One simple question. So objectives, we're going to interpret the social and cultural effects of the Industrial Revolution. We're going to examine the rise of the new middle class, the new industrial working class, and the development of labor unions. And we're going to describe the daily conditions in the cities and factories. So moving to the cities. So we've kind of discussed this, and I wouldn't say at length, but I mean, we've mentioned this a time or two, that the agricultural revolution, the enclosure movement pushed these poor peasants out of their villages and into these bigger cities that were popping up all across England. And so the Industrial Revolution brought on rapid urbanization. Urbanization means the movement of people to cities. So with the changes in farming, the increasing population growth, and the ever-rising demand for workers, it's going to lead the masses of people to move from their podunk rural villages and farms to the cities. And almost overnight, nearby villages around iron and coal mines ballooned into cities. And other cities grew up around the villages. Entrepreneurs built in once quiet towns. Remember, entrepreneurs are people that risk their money to start new businesses. All right, this is probably during the Industrial Revolution in America. Basically, if you've ever seen what is it? The Beverly Hillbillies? That's an old show. Basically packing up everything and moving to California. But, everyone's packing up and moving to the city. The big city living. All right, so an example of this, your book goes into kind of like a little case study about the British market town of Manchester, England. Remember, we talked about Manchester yesterday. And they had around 17,000 people living there during the 1750s. Within a few years, the town became the center of the textile industry. The population in the city soared to 40,000 in 1780, and by 1801, the population totaled 70,000. So in a matter of 50 years, was that 53,000 more people lived in Manchester. Visitors to Manchester described what they saw: the cloud of coal vapor that polluted the sky, the pounding noise of steam engines, and the filthy stench of its river. Because, hey, there were no water rights, there were no save the environment, there was none of that. So you got to get rid of some stuff, throw it in the river. So this growth of industry and rapid population growth dramatically changed the location and distribution of two resources: labor, work, and people. So here's some cloud vapor, coal vapor up in the air. Some more, this is probably a more aptly picture representation. All right, new social classes. So this is the test question. excuse me, the IR, Industrial Revolution, remember, I abbreviate Industrial Revolution IR, created a new middle class along with a new working class. Those in the middle class owned and operated new factories, mines, railroads, among other industries. And they lived a much comfier lifestyle than those of their workers. Kind of like, this is almost like the bourgeoisie. Um, not necessarily from the third, not the entire third estate from the French Revolution, right? We're talking about the bourgeoisie, the middle class bourgeoisie, bougie. So when these farm families moved to the cities, they became the workers in the mines and factories, because who needs a job? These people who don't have a way of living in the cities need a job, so we're just giving them the worst job there is. They face tough working conditions in an uncomfortable environments, people. Oh, why am I so tired? The industrial middle class. So those who benefited the most from the Industrial Revolution were obviously the entrepreneurs that put it in motion. The Industrial Revolution created the middle class bourgeoisie, like I just said, the third estate in the French Revolution. So some merchants who invested their growing profits in factories. Others were inventors or skilled artisans who developed new technology. There have been others who had rags to riches, heartfelt background stories started from the bottom and now they're here. And middle-class families lived in well-furnished, spacious homes on paved streets and had a ready water supply, and they wore fancy clothing and ate well. Pish posh. They took pride in their hard work and determination to get ahead, and very few held sympathy for the poor. And women in the industrial middle class did not leave the house, but they focused on raising the children, child rearing. Enlightenment. So this differed from the wealthy because the wealthy had servants to look after their children, and the working class had to have their children work because, money. So here's some, look up industrial middle class. You'll find this picture on Google. All right, the industrial working class. While the wealthy and middle classes lived in pleasant neighborhoods, vast numbers of the poor working class struggled to survive in these foul-smelling slums. They packed into tiny rooms called tenements, or multi-story buildings divided into apartments. Apartment buildings, tenements, same thing. However, tenements had no running water, only community pumps. And again, this is before cleanliness. And so there's no sewage or sanitation systems. So wastes and garbage were rotting in the streets. So if you lived on if you didn't live on the first floor of a tenement building, and there are no, when I say there are no sewage or sanitation systems, yeah, there are no toilets in these places. So you did your business in a bucket that stayed in your room, wherever you live, and you're probably living with 8 to 10 people in your little tenement. And the foul stench of your business. And then, you got to clean the bucket. So you got to empty the bucket. And what are you going to do with the bucket? You're going to dump it out in the street. Fun times. Sewage would also be dumped into rivers, creating overwhelming stench and contaminated the drinking water. And it's going to spread diseases like cholera, which is drinking dirty, poopy water. Gross. So here's an image of a tenement building. Here's a dead horse. The dead horse has no value and it's literally rotting in the street, and you got little kids playing next to a dead horse. Talk about coronavirus. And hey, put it in context for you. Like I said, a while back, I studied abroad in Brazil, and hey, you have something called, these are called favelas in Brazil, which are kind of the same thing. They probably do. This is modern 21st century. They probably do have toilets in their houses, but this is what you think about it. And a favela is another word for a weed that grows off on the side. But they still have sanitation problems. Okay, if you recall the 2000, what was it? Was the Olympics? The World Cup, I believe, was in 2014, and the Olympics were in 2016, or vice versa. And they weren't going to hold the Olympics in Brazil, in Rio, and Sao Paulo, the two big cities, because of the favela issue and crime rates and all that fun stuff going down in the hood. So they had to clean it up so they could, put on a show for the world, even though the real problems are. Anyways, I digress. So frustrated. Although labor unions were illegal at the time, secret unions did exist among the frustrated British workers. They wished to initiate workers' reforms. So these workers' reforms are going to remain standard across the board anywhere. All right. So they're going to want pay increases and better working conditions, straight up. Working conditions, working hours, and pay increase. Those are always the same exact things. And you're going to hear this over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Okay. So when we talk about other countries and their rise and then their working class struggles, here we go. So they wished to initiate worker reforms, such as, give me more money for my work, but they had no political power to effect change. And sometimes these frustrations are going to turn into violence. So from 1811 to 1813, there were these first instances of riots. A group of textile workers called Luddites resisted the labor-saving machines that were taking their jobs. And some would smash these textile machines or burn the factories down. They wore masks and operated at night. And there was actual widespread support for the Luddites among the working class in Britain. Then you have the Methodist movement. However, many working class people found a comfort in a religious movement called Methodism. This occurred by the influence of the movement of people from villages to cities who had lost connections with their old churches. You have a guy named John Wesley, and he had found the Methodist movement in the mid 1700s, and he stressed the need for a personal sense of faith, and encouraged his followers to improve themselves by being sober and moral. Methodist meetings had hymns and sermons promising forgiveness of sin and a better life to come. Preachers took to the slums to rekindle a sense of hope for the poor. They set up Sunday schools where they studied the Bible and learned how to read and write. Again, I don't know why I'm bringing it into the Southern accent. We're talking about England. And Methodism kind of helped channel workers' anger away from revolution and towards reform. Don't just go AWOL because a machine takes your job. Tell your boss that, you need people to work your business, not machines. And here you go. You got John Wesley. All right, hashtag workflow. So working in a factory system differed greatly from working on a farm. In rural villages, people worked hard, but their work varied according to the season, right? In the summer, you're going to be working. In the fall, you're going to be working until the sun goes down. In the winter, you might not have work on certain days because it's too cold, rainy, the weather's not right. Okay. Spring, you kind of work, you kind of don't. However, so that's according to the seasons, right? However, life was hard for poor rural workers who were part of the putting out system, but at least they got to work at their own pace. Remember the people working the ladies working in their home. Yeah, it was a daunting task and all that, but they got to work at their own pace, like I said yesterday. But The factory system in industrial towns, workers faced a rigid schedule set by the factory whistle. And workers worked long with shifts lasting from 12 to sometimes 18-hour days, 6 or 7 days a week. No break, doing the same thing every day, every day, every day, every day. Another one. So long days. Workers can only take breaks when the factory owners gave them permission, like eat lunch, go to the bathroom. Hashtag work life. However, if you're doing the same monotonous job, let's see, I don't know. Folding. Why would they fold t-shirts? Anyways, if you're doing something boring and you're working 12 to 18-hour days, 6 to 7 days a week, 5 years in a row, some of y'all are going to get tired. And these exhausted workers are going to suffer accidents from the machines that were unsafe. There are no safety protocols. Okay, the machine was made. You worked with the machine. You figured out how to work it. Boom. There's no safety. Oh, wear protective mask for working with a blowtorch and I don't even know, another tool. You know the tool where like and it like flashes. That's what I'm trying to think. So some might lose a finger, some might lose a limb, or some might even lose their life. In the textile mills, workers constantly breathe air filled with lint, which is going to damage their lungs. Workers who became sick or injured would lose their jobs. Again, this is a high turnover rate. If you became sick, you did not work for several days, you would be replaced because ain't nobody got no time for that. They got to feed the demand of this growing overseas empire from England. And you miss a day, you could lose. You lose a leg, you lose a limb, and you can't work properly. I mean, these owners have no pity. So if you got injured or sick, you probably lost your job. And as we talked about yesterday, most of the early factory workers were women rather than men. Why? Because employers often preferred to hire women because they were thought women could adapt easier to machines. They wouldn't become so frustrated and break the machines. And they're easier to manage. Also, women wages were a lot less than male wages. So like half the price cheaper to pay a woman than to pay a man to do the same job. Equality much? I don't think so. So here's a textile factory again. I think this is in America because I searched up Industrial Revolution, and this is what I get. Hey, but here you got more women. Okay, these are women. All right, women's struggles. Factory work burdened or created a double burden for women, not a double standard, but just a double bad thing. Okay, like I said, they worked like 12 to 18-hour days. So these new jobs would take them out of their homes for 12 hours or more each day. They would then return to their foul-smelling tenements, which we just discussed, which consisted of one damp room with a single bed. They would feed and clothe their families as best they can, clean them, give them a little bath, give them a little scrub-a-dub, and then cope with the problems such as sickness and or injury throughout the year, and just try to survive day by day. All right, hashtag cold world. Test question. The Industrial Revolution increased the demand for iron and coal, which in turn increased the need for miners. Although miners were paid more, working conditions in mines were even worse than the factories. They would work in darkness, and coal dust they breathed in, destroyed their lungs, also known as black lung disease. There are always dangers of explosions, flooding, and collapsing tunnels. Women and children who would work in mines were often using carts to carry heavy loads of coal, sometimes on all fours in low passages, because, hey, Children can work if they're small enough. They can go into crevices and tunnels that older adults cannot do. They also climb ladders carrying heavy baskets of coal several times a day. Talk about stunting your growth. You know, if you lift an exorbitant amount of weight, or exorbitant is not a good word. If you just if you carry more than, I don't know, triple your weight at such a young age, like 7 or 8, you're going to strain your growth plates and you're not going to grow as big as you could. So here you got an example on all fours carrying this cart of coal. You got workers leading the way. Here you got children, child workers, child labor is what this leads to. Oh, hey, child labor. There we go. It's like I've taught this class before. Factories and mines also hired many boys and girls. These children often start at the age of 7 or 8, or some as young as 5. Can you imagine that? You know, think to yourself, if you have a younger brother or younger sister who is like, you know, less than the age of 10, they could be working here. They could. They were mainly hired because they're nimble-fingered, right? They were quick-moving, and they could change spools in the hot, humid textile mills where sometimes people could not see because of all the dust in the air. They would crawl under machinery to repair broken threads in the mills. Conditions were worse for children in the mines. Some sat all day in the dark, opening and closing air vents. Others hauled coal carts in the extreme heat. And because children helped with work on the farm, you know, parents accepted that child labor, you know, and it kind of translates over to the cities. Like, they worked in the farms, so they're going to work in the cities. Plus, the money that they earned, however little it was, helped, you know, keep the family afloat, helped the family, you know, keep paying those rent bills, supporting, you know, providing food for the family, everything. Okay. So it is a bad idea in the long run. But, you know, when you're a family that just got pushed out from the enclosure movement, you're moving to Manchester to work in factories, is school really that important? Probably not. Probably not. Because everyone's got to work for your entire family to survive. So here's more child labor pictures in the mines, coal mines. Here's a little girl. Like, come on, that girl looks no more than 5. Girl or a boy, whatever. A little child. That's heartbreaking. And here you got some younger kids, teenagers, probably like 11, 12. All right, however, there was something to smile about. It's not all doom and gloom here. Child labor reform laws were often called factory acts. And these factory acts were going to be passed in the early 1800s to reduce a child's workday from 12 hours, or from like 16 to 18 hours to 12 hours, and also remove children under the age of 8 or 9 from working in the cotton mills. And because these laws were generally not enforced, British lawmakers formed teams of inspectors to ensure that factories and mines obeyed the laws in the 1830s and 1840s. Inspector Javert. Does that ring a bell? More laws would be passed to shorten the workday for women, and that required child workers to be educated first before they get hired. So, the Industrial Revolution, its effects. Okay, since the 1800s, people have debated about whether the Industrial Revolution was a blessing or a curse. The early industrial age brought on terrible hardships. In time, though, reformers pressed for laws to improve working conditions. Labor unions won the right to bargain with employers for better wages, hours, and working conditions. Eventually, the working class men would gain the right to vote, which would give them political power to put forth such working conditions. And there was also some positives, like the demand for mass-produced goods grew, the consumption cycle that I discussed yesterday, and new factories opened, which created more jobs. Wages rose so much that workers had enough money after paying rent and buying food for the week. They can now go buy a newspaper and or go to the music hall for entertainment because they live in that bougie life now. And hey, we're done. We're done. And you know, another quick short video for you guys. Again, you know, that's the effects of the Industrial Revolution. Hopefully you did enjoy. If you did, smash that like button. And your homework, before I go, your homework is, what is it? Page 182, 3 through 5. All right. So that's your homework. And yeah, as always, stay safe, wash your hands,